everyone. Again, thank you so much for spending your evening with us to discuss some pollinator habitat in Iowa tonight. My name is Kylie Friedrich. I am with Monarch Joint Venture, and I'm going to kick us off this evening before I hand it over to my co-panelists for tonight. Really just so grateful to have a chance to chat with folks in Iowa about some of their habitat options and a little bit about our organizations individually. As mentioned, I am the Agriculture Program and Habitat Help Desk Coordinator with the Monarch Joint Venture. We are a nonprofit based in the Twin Cities area, but having a national scope where we as a partnership organization really focus on 4 main areas of science, education, habitat, and as mentioned, partnerships. Partnerships are really the bread and butter of what we do so that we can collaborate across sectors, across industries, and across the country to advocate for monarch habitat and health protections, as well as their amazing migration that we care about so much. These are just a sampling, if not all encompassing, all of our partnerships that we have within the Monarch Joint Venture. Again, working with small organizations, large organizations, state and federal agencies, as well as some of our partners here on the call tonight. So really over the years of our established relationship building and collaborations, we've been able to really pursue some of the main questions when it comes to science and research for the monarch butterfly, as well as action-oriented things that we can do as citizens and community members. Very much we are guided by some of these principal documents, the North American Monarch Conservation Plan, as well as the 2021 Monarch Conservation Implementation Plan from the Monarch Joint Venture. These 2 documents act as kind of our guiding lighthouse of where and how we can do our work best and with whom in all of these sectors. A large part of that is the community science work that we do with these aforementioned programs, as well as some of the science and research associated with the integrated monarch monitoring program. This is a national sampling protocol that we developed in collaboration with our university and research partners that many of our partner agencies use so that we can build the knowledge and data sets that we need to make informed policy and decision making. In addition, we offer the Pollinator Habitat Help Desk line, where you can call us at 833-MILKWEE and get a one-to-one person contact to answer some of your questions. Those questions range in everything from monarch biology to, I have 30 acres I'd like to restore, where do I start? So please feel free to reach out to us and use this resource to answer those hard-hitting monarch questions, whatever they may be. Additionally, we help to facilitate a website, a clearinghouse of information called Farmers for Monarchs, really focusing on providing resources for our agricultural partners across the country. And this is simply just an opportunity to highlight some of the work that we do, but really spending the rest of tonight focusing on the partner work of our wonderful organizations that we have here on the call tonight, Prairie Rivers of Iowa, as well as the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund and Conservation Blueprint. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you, David, so we can hear a bit more about PRI.
Great, thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we can go ahead and get started. So, like Kylie said, we are Prairie Rivers of Iowa. We run a pollinator conservation program. I'm David Stein. I'm the coordinator for the Watersheds and Wildlife Program, where the pollinator conservation program is housed. So just a little bit about us at Prairie Rivers. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit, and really our work is all-encompassing here in Iowa. We both work to conserve Iowa's cultural resources and Iowa's natural resources. As a part of this, we have 2 main programs. One is the Lincoln Highway Heritage Byway that we manage the cultural resources along all throughout the state of Iowa. And then the Watersheds and Wildlife Program really focuses on water quality improvements and creating habitat for Iowa's pollinators and wildlife. So just a brief introduction about the state of pollinators here in Iowa and the need for actually planting pollinator habitat. So our pollinators are threatened by 3 main threats here in the state. These are habitat loss, pesticide drift, and disease. But by far the biggest contributions for pollinator loss are habitat loss and that pesticide drift. And here in central Iowa, at least, we have over 400 species of bees and over 100 species of butterflies, including monarchs, that we are actively working to create habitat for. So additionally, some trends in pollinator decline here in Iowa. In 2014, that was a huge year for pollinator decision-making here in the state. Both the Dakota skipper and Poweshiek skipperling were listed as threatened and endangered respectively. Then in 2017, the rusty-patched bumblebee, which is also here in Iowa, in central Iowa, was listed as endangered, being the only bee in the lower 48 states being classified as endangered. In 2020, we had some setbacks with the rusty-patched bumblebee being denied critical habitat designation by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the monarch butterfly being denied Endangered Species Act protection, with the service kind of kicking the can down the road for 4 years and then reevaluating it later. Then in 2021, both a petition was filed for the American bumblebee to be listed as endangered. This was as a result of the Iowa population dropping by an estimated 50%. And then in 2021, Iowa experienced the highest rate of winter honeybee loss in the entire country. So compared to the rest of the states, we are in the worst shape for losing honeybee colonies. So a lot of action needs to be taken in terms of establishing habitat. So we provide a couple services to help get that habitat on the ground. Our 4 main services are consulting, site analysis, garden and landscape design, and then we run a community native seed bank. So we focus really on a diverse mix between rural and urban land. We're mainly focused on central Iowa, but we're not limited to central Iowa. So we will help anyone in need throughout the state. So our consulting services are free of charge. We really just visit with landowners on their land. We assess their current land use. We provide one-on-one assistance with the either landowner or farmer or operator of that land. And it's really an opportunity for that landowner to ask us questions, really getting real-time feedback about some of their land use decisions and their management and things like that. The site analysis is a little more in-depth. We do analysis on our end using some of our apps and monitoring software to get more of an in-depth look at what your land might be. So we provide a packet of information that includes soil information, the original ecosystem cover of that land, any potential water stress from either flooding or ponding, crop productivity if you have a farm. Depending on where different soils are, your soils could be more productive or less productive. And then finally, some species records of endangered and threatened species, especially with pollinators. And then following all of that analysis, we provide some plant recommendations based on our findings. We also provide a garden and landscape design service. So we help landowners visualize a pollinator habitat. And we really stress and emphasize designing a pollinator habitat for the entire season. Something that's going to be available for pollinators from the early spring all the way to the late fall, just so they have an active bite to eat throughout the season. And this will include things like plant lists from the previous analysis, contact information for plant and seed vendors, and then planting instructions. And finally, we offer a community native seed bank every November to April. So what this is we provide free native seeds to people who are interested, as long as they stop by our office and sit through a consultation where we get to know their land and what plants they might need. So we provide those seeds based on soil types, based on sun availability, based on size of the land. And we also include that planting instruction list based on what we give you. So this was really made possible by native nurseries. This year's nurseries are listed down below. When you do stop by and visit, we encourage a donation to keep that seed bank running. We usually run out of donations from native nurseries, so we always have to order more. So a donation is encouraged, but it's not required. If you can't provide a donation, that's perfectly all right. We will still send you home with plenty of seeds. And we just entered our 2nd year of this program this year. And just within that 2nd year, we were able to restore and enhance over 130 acres here in the state of Iowa. So we are very lucky to have really good feedback and a lot of interested people looking to plant native and plant pollinator habitat. So that's really Prairie Rivers of Iowa in a nutshell in our pollinator program. Here's my contact info on the screen. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions regarding pollinator conservation or establishing habitat, or are just interested in getting updates on where the native seed bank is going this year. We'll be happy to reach out to you and talk with you about any potential for pollinator habitat. But now I will turn this over to Elsa, and she can get the conversation started about the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund.
Thank you, David. Great. Appreciate that. So my name's Elsa Gallagher, and I am the Habitat Program Coordinator for the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. That's me there trying to catch a monarch. So what we're going to do tonight, folks, for the remainder of this, there's already been several questions about what if I'm not in Iowa? So what we're going to talk to you about is kind of general things that you need to know about when you're planning a pollinator planting, things you want to think about, and then some ways for you to receive services or seed from different programs, which David's already talked about. Kylie's talked about the Monarch Joint Venture and how they can help you with your questions. So for you, for the remainder of the program, we're going to talk about the bee and butterfly habitat and how to create quality pollinator habitat. There's a Q&A function. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you would please ask questions there, I'm going to keep track of those and try and go ahead and narrow them down into just a couple of questions that we'll finish with at the end of the talk. During the talk, if you could put during the chat function, the chat's right next to the Q&A function. If you would put your name and your location in the chat function, that way we can keep track of who was here and who was on the call tonight. And so we've got you muted, and we're going to answer your questions at the end of the talk. If we don't get to everything, which we likely won't, we will provide contact information for you to follow up with us. So with that, I am going to introduce Pete Berthelsen. Pete is our partnership director for the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. So Pete will be visiting with you about what we provide, and yeah, you can ask any questions at the end of the talk, or just put them in the chat function as we go, or the Q&A function, I'm sorry. Questions go in the Q&A function. Your information about who you are and where you're from goes in the chat function. Thank you, folks, and I will turn it over to Pete Berthelsen, who is joining us from the great state of Nebraska.
All right. Thank you, Elsa, David, and Kylie. And with that, let's get going. We have lots of interesting and cool stuff to chat about tonight. Before we get too far into it, though, I want to give you just a very quick introduction about myself. Here's a picture of my lovely wife and I as we're conducting a prescribed burn on our property. I am chatting with you tonight from central Nebraska, the area of the state that's referred to as the Luss Hills. And the Luss Hills are a portion of the state that's kind of evenly divided between row crop production and rangeland. This is a aerial view of part of our farm that we have that is also evenly divided between rangeland and crop ground. So I have a little bit of that agricultural background. I'm an amateur beekeeper. I say amateur because I have 6 hives and work to keep those going. But really what I am is a wildlife biologist that is very passionately interested in getting this kind of habitat on the landscape. Very highly diverse, productive habitat. And that's a little bit of what we're going to chat about tonight is pollinator habitat. So before we get too far into this, I want to give you 5 foundational thoughts that really, and thoughts and principles that really guide kind of how we think about pollinator habitat and how we design it. So just kind of keep these things in mind. The first is that I think right now we have a really unique moment in time, a moment in time where a very high percentage of the public understands that there's some sort of a problem with pollinator health, whether it's honeybees and colony collapse disorder, that David kind of referenced, or monarch butterflies or whatever, there is a unique moment in time. And all you have to do is look at the fact that the New York Times wrote an article this spring about monarch butterflies. The public has a very heightened sense of concern and understanding of what's going on. The second foundational thought is that when you call something pollinator habitat, everybody probably gets a picture in their mind of what they think pollinator habitat should look like. And usually I describe it as, usually it is the photo on the calendar in your office when you flip it to the month of July. This gorgeous flowering meadow, kind of like you see here. And we can get to that, but to get to pollinator habitat that looks like that, it really kind of requires some very specific thought that we're going to chat about a little bit tonight. The second or third foundational thought is that not all habitat, pollinator habitat, is created equal. Just because a plant is flowering doesn't mean that it has real high pollinator value. So when we have the opportunity to get pollinator habitat, we want to design it to be as highly functioning as we can get. The next foundational thought is that, especially using things like monarch butterflies as an example, if we try to solve pollinator health and habitat issues using the same techniques that we've used for the last 10 or 20 years, we will not be successful. We have to start thinking about doing things differently and not in the same way that we've been doing them. We have to start thinking about some innovative techniques. And here's an example. When I talk about monarch butterflies, this shows the estimated wintering population of the eastern monarch butterfly population. And the national goal is to have that population line get to where that red bar is. And we haven't been there in a long time. And so the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund uses these principles called next gen habitat projects. And we'll talk about those a little bit later tonight, but that's how we bring innovation to try and make those things happen. And the next thing is, if we, when we get an acre of habitat, we need to do everything that we can to make it the best acre of habitat that we can get. When we're fortunate enough to have an acre of it, we need to make sure that that is as highly functioning as we can get. And so those are kind of the foundations that we use that drive what we're going to talk about. So one of the things that we're going to very briefly chat about right now are what I call the 4 pillars that determine whether or not you have great pollinator habitat outcomes. And those 4 pillars are thinking about, before you start anything, thinking about how you go about it, site preparation, your seed mixture, and management. And we're going to very briefly chat about those things tonight. And the first one is what I call the art and science of before you start. And that is thinking about what your objectives are for your project. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that in the short amount of time that we have tonight, we're not going to be able to go into these topics at the depth that you probably would hope for. But fear not, because we have recorded webinars from other presentations in which we have gone into this part of tonight's discussion in a much greater detail, where we talk about the pillars of habitat management. We also make available pollinator habitat tip videos that talk about different things. These are all resources that will be available for you. Throughout tonight's presentation, if you see this little camera symbol show up on one of the slides, that means that we have a pollinator habitat tip video on that subject. And you can access all these videos, all these past webinars and everything on the Conservation Blueprint website. And then you can also follow us on the different social media platforms as well. So the what are your objectives? That's where you have to sit and think about what kind of pollinator species do I want to benefit? What different things do I want to think about benefiting? Monarch butterflies, grassland songbirds. Do I want to improve livestock grazing? And we can touch all of those with great pollinator habitat, but they really require that you need to kind of stop and think about a few things first before you start. What's the soil type that I have? Where am I located in the country? What kind of pollinator species do I want to benefit? What equipment will I have access to? How will I perform my site preparation? Those are all things that you have to consider and kind of make a plan of before you start doing anything else. So the second pillar is site preparation. And if one of the pillars was ever more important than another one, site preparation would very likely be the one that we would consider the most important. And I'll just start by saying that in site preparation, if you have a site that is currently in existing grasses, that's the hardest platform that there is to work with to convert to great pollinator habitat. It takes a very, very specific plan. So one of the tools and resources that we have available for you that just came out last month is a very, very detailed step-by-step guidance for you, a pollinator habitat establishment and management guide. And this is available for you free of charge, and we will show you how to access that a little bit later tonight. The third pillar in this foundation of excuse me, how to have great pollinator habitat is to make sure that you have the correct seed mixture and that it's planted in the correct way. And here's one of the foundational thoughts that you should take from tonight's discussion. High diversity equals high quality. And remember, when you see the little camera symbol down there, we have a pollinator habitat tip that talks just about this issue. So for this research that I just put up on the screen, don't worry about the names and the information in there. What I want you to take from this slide is the research that showed that the more species that you have in your planting, the more plant species in your planting, the more pollinator species you'll benefit. So if your pollinator planting had 9 species versus 20 species or 50 species, the more plant species in your mixture, the more different pollinator species you'll benefit. And the last of the pillars that I want to mention tonight is regular maintenance. There is nothing that we can do where we plant something, walk away from it, and always have great pollinator habitat. You need to think about doing a little bit of something each and every year. And here's one example of where we took a project that had become dominated by grasses. And again, there's a pollinator habitat tip on this one. That this pollinator project had become dominated by grasses. We conducted a prescribed fire on it. We sprayed it with a herbicide, not an insecticide, an herbicide that only impacted grasses, not the wildflower species in there. And at the end of one growing season, this is what it looked like. The wildflower species that were in our pollinator planting, but had become suppressed by the dominance of the grasses, were released. And this is what that project ended up looking like. Another thing for management is in virtually every new or young pollinator habitat project, we're going to recommend that you conduct mowing during the first or second year. And we also just released a pollinator habitat tip on this 2 weeks ago that talked about how and when you conduct mowing on new pollinator habitat projects, and making sure that you're mowing them at the correct height. So that's a short pollinator habitat tip video. This isn't a 20-minute video. These pollinator habitat tips are all 2 to 4 minutes long and cover individual topics. The next thing that I want to suggest to you is that you need to plan for weed competition. This is an example of a planting in year 1, and it has all kinds of volunteer plant species that have showed up in this planting. In this case, there's a lot of sunflowers and giant ragweed in this picture. That's pretty natural. It's going to happen. One of the things that we talk about is that in plantings, they tend to, in year 1, they sleep. And in year 2, they creep. And in year 3, they leap. That's kind of a natural process. So that kind of happens. The other thing that I want to talk about is the perspective of what a weed is. Just because something is called a weed doesn't mean it's bad. And here's an example of an agricultural field that last year was planted to corn, and this year is planted to soybeans. So what was this plant right here in the middle is a corn plant. Last year it was the crop. This year it's a weed. A weed is merely a plant that is someplace you don't want it to be. So my comment about weeds and weed competition is to get it to look like this is a process. And I really recommend that you enjoy the process. Stop and pause long enough to notice how your planting is changing with time. And later this year, we will have a pollinator habitat tip released on this subject as well. All right, the next thing is we want to make sure that when we're doing pollinator projects that we're really thinking about promoting multiple benefits. Here's a great example. This is a solar energy project, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about solar energy projects a little bit later in this presentation. But here's an example of where a renewable energy project that has just gone in has produced a multiple benefit by very strategically planting this to a pollinator habitat underneath the panels and designing that seed mixture specifically so that it does not grow taller than the lower panel height. That's a multiple benefit that we can get out of that. I guess the next thing that I would say is that pollinator habitat can and must work with agriculture to accomplish our goals and objectives. If we want to turn things around for monarch butterflies and rusty patch bumblebees and honeybees and grassland songbirds and things like that, we have to find ways to work with agriculture. And I think there's great opportunities out there, because I believe that there's room for conservation on every farm and ranch in the country. And when we find an opportunity where pollinator habitat like this can work within an agricultural system, then we want to make sure that we're designing the best possible habitat that we can get. And here's just another example of where agriculture is working with pollinator habitat side by side. Okay, so now that was very short, and remember, we have lots of resources available to give you a lot more detailed information about what we just talked about with the 4 pillars of pollinator habitat. So that's available for you. Hopefully this just kind of whet your appetite to look at those things. And now I'd like to tell you how the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund can be a resource to work with you on your next project. So the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is another nonprofit that works with folks to provide free pollinator seed mixtures on projects that are 2 acres in size or larger. It's open to public land, private land, corporate land. That should be interpreted as any land. We have a very simple online application process, and every project receives one-on-one technical guidance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This program is called Seed a Legacy. This program is currently available in 12 states. And the first thing that I want to tell you is if you are not in one of those 12, we're coming. Hang on, we're coming. We started in 2 states, and then we went to 6 states, and then we went to 10 states, and now we're at 12. We're strategically growing. And the 12 states that we've selected are pretty strategically selected based on their critical importance to honeybees and commercial beekeeping, and their critical importance to the recovery of the eastern monarch butterfly population. If you're on the webinar tonight and you are in an area of the country that is highlighted in red, orange, or yellow, you are in the critical component areas that are where we need habitat to benefit monarch butterflies. And a bunch of people on the call tonight are from Iowa, and you can obviously tell that Iowa is the center of the bullseye for monarch butterfly population recovery. So when the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund works on pollinator habitat, we do it really uniquely. I don't know of any other conservation program that does this, but we provide 2 pollinator seed mixtures. The one on the left is what we call a honeybee seed mixture, and the mixture on the right is what we call a monarch butterfly seed mixture. And let me describe those to you a little bit more. A honeybee seed mixture establishes very quickly. This is literally a photo of what it looked like 2 months after it was planted. This is a mixture that is designed specifically with the plant species, clovers and other things that honeybees thrive on. It's the forage that they're most in demand of. Now, lots of other pollinator species, native bees and monarch butterflies use it as well, but on half of our project, this is what we establish. And on the other half of the project, we establish what we call a monarch butterfly seed mix. This is slower to establish, takes a longer period of time. Pollinator species use and benefit from both seed mixtures, but because of how they're designed, they establish very differently. So we split those into 2 different seed mixtures. We don't mix them together. They're planted in separate plantings and provide great pollinator benefits. And I'll back that up with some research here in just a little bit. So here's a couple of ways in which the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixtures could be planted. Let's just say you have 6 acres that you would like to plant to pollinator habitat. It can be as simple as you plant 3 acres of the honeybee mix right next to 3 acres of the monarch butterfly mix. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. More commonly, what we probably do is take this same 6-acre field, and again, there's a pollinator habitat tip on this, but we plant the honeybee mixture around the perimeter of that project, and we plant the monarch butterfly mixture in the center. And the reason that we do that is the honeybee mix can act as a green fire break, so that if we want to place prescribed fire on the honeybee mix, that green fire break acts as the moat around the castle. Think of it that way, so that we can more safely put prescribed fire onto the landscape and be performing some important management into the future on those pollinator plantings. So if you're listening tonight and you're like, well, I'm in one of the 12 states, but I don't have 2 acres myself that I could devote to this, all is not lost, because we strive very hard to find a reason to say yes to working with you on a project. So here's another example. Just say you have 1 acre, and across the fence, your like-minded neighbor is interested in this as well, and they have 1 acre. If they're close enough together, we'll add those pieces up together to get them to 2 acres. So we can do projects that way. Remember, we strive hard to find a reason to say yes. If there can be a great pollinator outcome, we want to find a way to say yes. So this design of a honeybee mix and a monarch butterfly mix works exceptionally well with renewable energy. So on all solar projects like this one of the challenges that a project like this comes with, if we want to have pollinator habitat included, is there is a lower panel height, and we don't want to plant vegetation that grows taller than the lower panel height on the project. We don't want to plant vegetation that's going to be above where the panel is. So the honeybee mix can be designed to be short growing plants, just like you see in this picture. So here's a real world example, an 80 megawatt project that we worked on, where under the panels, we designed a seed mixture just for this project that had honeybee benefits. And outside of where the panels are, but inside the project boundary, we planted the monarch butterfly mix, where we can put that traditional habitat in and we don't have to worry about a lower panel height. We can have the taller vegetation. That's one of the great ways that we can collaborate, be innovative, and produce multiple benefits. If you have a solar energy project going into your neighborhood, your county, your state, raise your hand and ask, are pollinator benefits being included? And the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund could be part of helping to make that happen. So I said earlier that our seed mixtures are innovative and in how we design them, and that we produce great results. Let me back that up with some early research. The first thing is that we currently have 6 research studies going on that are looking at the value of a Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixture. And I want to show you some of the results of one of those 6 studies. And this was a study conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey. And in this study, they looked at the pollinator value from USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, conservation programs. And they looked at all available pollinator habitat on the landscape: roadsides, national wildlife refuges, pastures, hayland, state wildlife management areas, and Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixtures. And the first thing that we found is that Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund seed mixtures had twice as many flowers as everything else out there that was available on the landscape. Twice as many flowers. When it came to honeybees, we had 3 times the number of honeybee visits than anything else that was out there. That includes other programs that were designed to produce pollinator benefits. 3 times the value. But what I'm perhaps most excited about is it had 8 times the number of native bee flower visits and 8 times the value of anything else that was out there. This is a study that just looked at bees. We have other studies that are coming out that are looking at all kinds of other things: butterflies, native bees, honeybees, and all kinds of things. This study just looked at honeybees and native bees, but it produced some really great results that we're excited about. So, what are the opportunities for collaboration? I hope that you're starting to think, well, this could maybe work here or maybe work there. Let me show you some real world examples of what we've done to get you thinking about how this could be a partner in your efforts. First and foremost, we work with private landowners. That's kind of our bread and butter. This is a couple from Minnesota. In their project 1 year after it was planted, following our gold plan pollinator habitat establishment. But we work on all kinds of other things. Here's an example of a city wastewater treatment plant. And they have all this grass around their wastewater treatment plant that they end up having to mow every 10 days. we have a number of cities that we're working with that have decided to convert that grass area to pollinator habitat. Think about that if you're in a city where you might have one of those things happening. We're working with all kinds of states to take public land, state wildlife management areas, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to put pollinator habitat onto publicly owned lands. Renewable energy, I've talked about this a lot. We're currently working with solar energy projects in 21 states. 21 states. That working with solar energy, renewable energy projects is not limited to that CETA Legacy 12-state area. This actually happens to be a photo from a project inside the city limits of Washington, D.C., where we're working on a solar energy project. A corporate campus. Here's a photo from Iowa for our friends on the phone tonight from Iowa, where we are establishing pollinator habitat in this area of this new corporate campus that's going on. And there's going to be walking trails in it. It's going to be an area where this corporation's employees go for breaks and lunch breaks and have just a beautiful property to work on. Here's an example of another solar energy project that is going in with a school. So this is renewable energy that will be running this high school, and under those solar panels, we are planting it to pollinator habitat. Here's another one, utility right-of-ways. This is a power line right-of-way with a walking trail beside it, where we have established that to pollinator habitat. We're actually doing a new project with the Cincinnati Zoo to put a project in on their property that people will be able to visit. Here's a new one for you. This is also from Iowa. We've planted pollinator habitat on a state prison ground. Who would have thought that as one of the options? We can work on just about anything. And then there's also city hike and bike trails and that sort of thing. So there's a really wide range of potential projects. I hope that everybody on the webinar tonight can think of something in their area. Is there a solar energy project going in? Does the city I live in have a wastewater treatment plant? Could we put something in a park? Do I own or have friends that own land that are interested in putting things in? Lots of opportunities. So I want to close tonight with one thought, and that is that I think pollinators and their habitat needs are a unique glue that can connect all kinds of things. So everybody that's on the webinar tonight is probably pretty interested in pollinator habitat, honeybees, monarch butterflies, something like that, but not everybody is. But I want to run through these last couple of slides and let you think about all the people that you know, whether it's somebody, your neighbor, somebody you bump into at the grocery store, you see at church. Let me know if one of these hot buttons that I'm going to show you right now wouldn't be something that they're interested in. Maybe they're not interested in butterflies or honeybees or a butterfly garden, but they're probably going to be interested in one of these things. And this is how this kind of habitat and pollinator habitat and health needs can touch all kinds of things. So clearly, it's what we need to provide monarch butterfly benefits and reverse the downward trend that population is on. Same holds true for honeybees. Providing access to high quality forage will reverse that trend of very, very high annual losses for beekeepers. But then there's all kinds of other things. Think about food sustainability. And when you go to the grocery store, the things that are organic, free range, grass-fed, non-GMO, all of those monikers that end up on food right now, pollinator habitat can play a very critically important role in helping deliver the kind of food sustainability that increasingly people are looking for in the store. If you want to think about a group of critters that have been kicked in the shin pretty hard, it's grassland songbirds. Grassland songbird populations, some of them have had over 90% population declines in the last 40 years. Pretty short period of time. The kind of pollinator habitat that we're talking about putting on the landscape is exactly what these guys need. Renewable energy, we've talked about that a lot tonight. There's a lot of solar energy projects going in all across the country. If you hear of a solar energy project going into your community, your county, your state, your region, raise your hand and ask, are pollinator benefits being included? We can design these so that there is no additional cost to establish this to pollinator habitat versus just grass. The Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund would be happy to work with those folks. Precision agriculture is another option. If there are areas of a farm or ranch that underproduce, pollinator habitat can be one of the ways of addressing resource concerns on a farm and ranch and actually increasing the farm and ranch income on that property. Water quality. You might not care about monarch butterflies or honeybees, but I bet you care about the quality of your water. Pollinator habitat can be one of the key tools that we use to keep agricultural chemicals out of our drinking water and improve water quality and soil health and all kinds of those things. Right-of-ways and utilities, there are millions and millions of acres in the country of right-of-ways and utilities like this gas pipeline that we would love to work with folks on creating pollinator habitat on there. And as David mentioned tonight, he showed a picture of the rusty patch bumblebee. That's this guy right here. It is an endangered species. We want to prevent other pollinator species from becoming listed as an endangered species, and we want to increase pollinator populations, and great high quality forage pollinator habitat is the most cost-effective way of doing that. Whether it's regal fritillary butterflies or rusty patch bumblebees. And I guess I just close by saying that pollinators, their health and their habitat needs have the unique ability to join all kinds of interests. And that's what we're all about. So with that, I want to remind you that we have this cool pollinator habitat establishment and management guide available free of cost to you. You access that off of our website, provides great information. I referred to the gold plan tonight. It's all detailed in there about how you go about it and provides very specific management. So last thing, what can you do? Well, I hope, number one, I hope that you're asking yourself that question. And number two, I want to give you 4 options. Option number 1 is the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund has something called Gifts That Grow. Whether it's Mother's Day, somebody's birthday, an anniversary, a memorial, or any other special occasion that you want to recognize somebody or give a gift. Gifts That Grow is an option where you can make a contribution of $50 or more, and that $50 will establish 1/4 of an acre of pollinator habitat in the name of whoever you want to recognize. Gifts That Grow produce a certificate that you present to them as their gift to let them know that you've given to the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, and in their name, there is pollinator habitat being established. Pretty cool. Think about, the last time that you gave a set of flowers to somebody as a gift and you spent about $50 and the flowers last 5 days. Here's an example to take that same $50 and have pollinator habitat that will be there for a minimum of 5 years. That's a great way to make a difference. If you're on this webinar tonight and you would love to help us co-host one like the Monarch Joint Venture and Prairie Rivers of Iowa did tonight, we'd love to chat with you. Hit up Elsa in the Q&A section and let her know about it. We'd love to do another one of these. How about getting some Seed a Legacy flyers from us and hand them to your friends that might be interested in this? Or follow us and like us and give us a good review on social media. Those are 4 things that you can do. One of them costs a little bit of money. The other 3 are free, and there's something that you can do that would absolutely make a difference. So that's the kind of pollinator habitat that we want to get on the landscape. Everybody that joined this and registered for this webinar tonight is being added to the distribution list for these habitat tip videos. They come out once a month. So you will now receive those and can watch for them. If you decide you don't want to receive that, there's just a button that you click to unsubscribe. And remember that you can follow us on all kinds of social media. And here is how you would get a hold of myself or Elsa. And so with that, I am going to leave this up, but I'm going to turn it back over to Elsa and Kylie and David, and we are going to take your questions now. And we look forward to those.
And again, if folks, thank you, Pete, very much. If you could remember to put the questions in the question and answer button instead of the chat button, that way they're all in one spot, that would be super helpful. So Pete, I'm going to start you off with an easy one. And this one is from anonymous attendee. They come to a lot of our talks. So anonymous attendee asks, what herbicide do you recommend for grass control that does not impact the forbs?
Yeah, so number one, there's a pollinator habitat tip that takes you through step by step on this. But the herbicide that we recommend and use is called clethodim, clethodim, clethodim. And you spray that on the grasses when they're 5 to 6 inches tall. So in the pollinator habitat tip that you'll look at, we did it following a prescribed fire. And then we spray that on there, and the results are absolutely dramatic. So Elsa, as you know, natural succession means that the grasses always win. Eventually, they will tend to outcompete the wildflowers in our planting. And the wildflowers are probably what we're most interested in. They're pretty. They provide the pollen and the nectar that our pollinator species like, so we want to have more of that. Just remember that there's nothing we can do where we plant it, walk away from it, and always have great habitat. So that's one example of how you can work on that. And I will say, I think that's a really cool, interesting pollinator habitat tip. So I would encourage people to check that one out.
Thank you, Pete. Hey, I forgot to give you kind of an update on who's listening in, and I know that might help you as you formulate some of these answers, but we got folks all the way from California to New Jersey tonight. We've got folks from Virginia, Illinois, South Dakota, Iowa, Arkansas. We have some friends from Minnesota, from near White Bear Lake. You would remember that name, Pete. Tom and Diane are on tonight. And Tyson's on from Kansas.
Nice.
So it's a great partner with us over there at Star Seeds. And Wayne with the Soybean Association is also on. And we've got quite a few Missouri participants as well, and several master gardeners. So I think it's a really nice group. Oh, and Massachusetts. Thank you. I didn't forget. It was near Boston, I believe. So
nice.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and pull another question here. We've got a question that's related to renewable projects, specifically solar.
Nice.
So on average, how many flowering species may be included to at the maximum to increase the diversity of the low growth species? I know it varies with site condition locations, but what are the possibilities? And I know you're going to say height matters. So, but I'll let you take it from there, Pete.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a complicated question, but I'll tell you that the lower panel height, so how the bottom panel, how high that is off the ground determines everything. If the lower panel height were 36 inches off of the ground, you could design a incredibly diverse planting of native plant species and really produce great value. The lower that gets, the closer it gets to the ground, the fewer options that you have. My personal opinion is that on very large utility scale projects, the industry standard is going to between 18 inches and 24 inches off the ground. If that's the case, there are very, very few options available. So that means the diversity of your seeding mix becomes limited, and it might be 3, 4, 5, a 6 species mixture. Remember that when that lower panel height goes up, when I have a project that is 36 inches off the ground, I would probably have 20 species in there. But then also remember that in the areas outside the array on the project, where we don't have a vegetative height restriction, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund would have between 40 and 60 wildflower species in that planting.
Great. I knew that answer would have something to do with that height, that panel height. That's always the one, the kicker.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we've got a follow-up question on the clethodim. Can we assume, this is Wayne's asking us from Iowa, if we're going to spray with the clethodim, can we assume that there will be viable forb seed under the grass to emerge in the grass's place?
Absolutely. Yeah. So great question, Wayne. Again, if you watch that pollinator habitat tip video, the grasses tend to become suppressed or tend to suppress the wildflower species with time. And just like when you do a new project, a new planting, and you have all kinds of weeds that show up in the project, the same principle holds true that many plant species produce seeds that remain viable in the soil for decades. Some of them up to 70 years, 70 years. So yeah, when you provide that more open space, more sunshine, pull the grasses back into a better balance, the wildflowers can just literally explode. Good question.
Yep. So Liz from Indiana is asking us about how difficult the site prep on an old baseball field might be. They were retired last year, and it looks like she's wanting to work on converting those baseball fields.
Yeah, so number one, know that anything that is in existing grass is the hardest platform to work with. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that the amount of effort that you'll put into site preparation needs to be really specifically designed for your project, your geography, your location, your objectives. And it's almost certainly going to mean one entire growing season's worth of work preparing the site to get it ready. Because remember, you have to think about competition above ground with the grasses, but also below ground where the grasses and their root systems have filled up the soil horizon and will be presenting all kinds of competition there as well. So it would be challenging, not impossible, but challenging. And you just want to really have a very well-designed plan and then follow that plan.
Okay. There's a few questions, Pete, that are on here that are related to what do we do with other states? You know, we've got Arkansas. Is Arkansas out of the question? And then a longer kind of question from California is what can we do to work with the Bee and Butterfly Fund? We understand the Seed of Legacy is not available. Are there other opportunities, particularly for monarch conservation? It seems that for monarchs, you're focused on helping the eastern population, but not applicable to the Western conservation we're doing in California.
Yep. So once again, Elsa has worked multiple questions into one question on me
That's my goal.
that she does. I'll start with the monarch issue for our friends in California, and I'll provide the answer that Kylie would be providing, which is that the monarch joint venture and other partners, but the monarch joint venture has a biologist that is located in California specifically to work on the Western monarch population and is working on habitat issues. And so the first thing that I'm going to recommend is that our friend from California seek that person out. Winter Vaughn is her name, but if you go to the Monarch Joint Venture website, you will very quickly be able to find where Winter's at. If you can't, email Elsa or I in our contact information here, and we will connect you. For our friends from Arkansas and other states, the first thing is, if you're from something other than one of the 12 states for the Seed of Legacy program and you're interested, we need to be in your state, in this case, Arkansas. Step one, send that note to Elsa in the Q&A section down here, because we will be happy to have a conversation with you about how we can talk about and figure out how to bring the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund and our habitat efforts to your state quicker. So we know that we have to be in more states. We're working on it. It's a very strategically designed growth pattern that we have. So we're coming, but hit us up in the Q&A so that we can have a conversation with you about how we can get there the fastest.
Great. We have a question, Pete, if it's okay if I answer this one. Belinda's asking about working with the Missouri Department of Conservation. They have a cost share program that you can work with through the Conservation Department. But yes, we can provide the seed for those projects as long as they'll accept the seed mix. So Belinda, we're happy to do that. We've actually got 12 acres of on MDC ground here next to where I live that's planted this fall to a pollinator planting.
Yeah, and Elsa, I would, just remind people, remember that we use 2 seed mixtures.
Yep.
That's really unique. I don't know of any other conservation program anywhere that takes that approach. That's part of our innovation and our success. Sometimes for governmental programs, that makes it more challenging for us to kind of be able to take that methodology, that next gen habitat project design, and be able to fit into a more rigidly designed governmental program, because it's a governmental program.
Yep. Ronald from Indiana is asking, how large of a plot would you work with, or who would he contact to convert from field crop on HEL ground, so highly erodible land, to pollinator fields?
Well, if he has a cropping history, number one, he very likely would qualify for the U.S. Department of Agriculture conservation programs like CRP or something like that. There's a sign up open right now. They're absolutely taking projects and things like that. Those are projects that also the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund could work with. Just say for whatever reason it didn't qualify for a USDA program, or maybe you don't want to sign up for that long of a commitment or something. Those are the kinds of projects that we can work on. And quite frankly, something that wasn't agricultural production, we have to check a couple of boxes and kind of look at a few things. But generally speaking, those produce quicker pollinator benefits than something that was in existing grass. So that's the kind of one-on-one technical guidance and assistance that Elsa provides projects every single day. And we do absolutely work on them one-on-one. So, and remember, if it has a high likelihood of having a good pollinator outcome, we're going to work really, really hard to find a reason to say yes to supporting it.
Well, Pete, I think we're wrapping up the questions here.
Yep.
There was one for David, but I think he answered it in the typing chat box part. So we do have one last question from he who was muted and now he's sending multiple texties. I see this is recorded. How will it be available to view later?
Yep. So if you, all of our past webinars, the pollinator habitat tips and things, you can access on conservationblueprint.com. And this will take a week or something and it will be up, but we have other similar webinars that we've done. We have the pollinator habitat tips, pollinator plant profiles. There's all kinds of things on the conservationblueprint.com website.